Next up, our member Rich Simmons to introduce our keynote speaker, Ann Kinkade, my old friend who I actually met last Thursday at an event. It's a small world. Rich?
Please join me in welcoming Ann Kinkade, President, Family Enterprise USA.
Thanks, Rich. And Jim, just for clarification, I think I'm a long time, not an old friend, right? A whole week old is our relationship. So thank you, Rich, for the introduction, and to all of you for having me here. It's an honor to be amongst the fine members of the world's largest Rotary to talk about the world's largest contributor to our economy and to our society, and that would be family enterprises. I'm here today to share the untold story of America's family firms and how Family Enterprise USA was formed to support their interests. But it's important to note that their interests are also everyone's interests. And I'll work to help you understand that in case you are not already aware of that. So Family Enterprise USA, also known as FEUSA, is America's most trusted advocate and credible voice for family enterprises. The reason for that is because of the way we do our work, representing this important constituency. We are a nonpartisan 501c3 organization that exists to create an accurate public image for family firms and to place them at the table in terms of national policy decision making. I was told I could share a joke if it was in good taste, and I think this one is. So there's this story of a family enterprise, and it's successful, and the founder is getting older and older, and his son keeps saying to him, "Dad, you have to tell me the secret of your success." And he keeps asking this question for years. And when the father gets to be 80 years old, the son says, "Dad, I really have to know because you're getting older and things are going to happen, and I need to know what the secret of your success is." And his father says, "Well, I can't tell you or I'll have to shoot you." And he says, "Oh, okay. Why don't you tell my sister?" Just have to get that out of the way because we do recognize that family firms, that's their reputation, that they're all mixed up and they're all dysfunctional, and some of that is true. But we're here to dispel some of that myth and to talk really about what family firms represent. So I'd like to put this up because we know that our research, not only our research, I should say research exists that talks about the prevalence of family businesses and what they contribute. There are 5.5 million family firms in this country, and they contribute 57% to our nation's gross domestic product, and they employ 63% of our workforce. You have material in front of you that talks about that a little bit more too. Notably, in this time, it's also important to say that they create 75% of new jobs, and 60% of publicly traded companies are family companies because of their strategic or governance or ownership influence. So I want to go back to that employment data for a second because we often talk about big government. And regardless of where you stand politically in terms of that conversation, we know that the government is a huge employer. So by contrast, the local, state, and federal government employs 14% of our population, and the family enterprises employ 63%. So this should help give you some sense of the magnitude. So in spite of their strong economic might, I don't know how well you can see this cartoon, but what it shows is some numbers goofing around, and it says the numbers aren't working. It's not working from a public policy standpoint, and it's not working on behalf of family firms from a public image standpoint. And there are a variety of reasons for that. About a third of family firms survive from the first generation to the second. I was listening yesterday, Cairo Radio had a news chick, Linda Thomas, I guess, who interviewed 4 local family firms and asked them, is it harder to start the company or to sustain it? And they had a variety of responses. Another challenge to family firms in creating a movement around their a positive public image and their prevalence is that some of them don't embrace their own identity as a family enterprise. We did a survey through Family Enterprise last year, and we found that over 90% of the respondents identify themselves in an elevator speech to somebody as a family business. But when they're really out there talking about their identity, it goes off. It's only less than 30% who actually really embrace it. So this gap is something we're trying to address. And the other thing is that family firms tend to be fairly humble. There's a reason they're called private. Their businesses really aren't about them, and they don't necessarily want the light shown on them. So we're trying to shine the light on them collectively. So in addition to being the economic drivers of our community, or of our economy, they're also the heart and soul of our communities. Their leadership tenure is 4 to 5 times longer than in a publicly traded shareholder-controlled company. If you think about what that means strategically, it means great stability, both for the employees, for the community, for the suppliers, for the customers. Employee retention in family firms during an economic downturn is also stronger. Family firms are much less likely to lay off when the times are tough. I don't know how many of you caught this New York Times article a couple weeks ago that highlighted Marvin Windows and Doors. That's a Midwest-based family firm, 100 years old. And they actually, the headline doesn't quite capture it, but they actually instituted a no layoff pledge. And believe me, as you're well aware, the housing industry has been very hard hit, and therefore their business as a windows and doors manufacturer has been. Also, family firms comprise 50% of the top 100 places to work. We know through research that they use less debt, so therefore this bolsters their financial position, and then they're able to be more resilient during a downturn. They also embrace a concept called patient capital, which is really in stark contrast to what we see on Wall Street with trying to meet quarterly demands. And even publicly traded family companies are starting to hold off on expectations about meeting quarterly dividend requirements. Last week, I think it was, Ford announced that it wouldn't be issuing a dividend, even though they had $1.3 billion in earnings that quarter. So lastly, I think a distinguishing feature is that family firms are motivated by more than making a profit. Certainly they have to make a profit, but they're exceptionally philanthropic. The Boston Globe cited that the average family firm contributes $50,000 a year annually. And you know that through your own organization here. I watched the videotape of the Wheelchair Foundation, and that family firm, which was based here and sold, but they went on to make philanthropy their family's purpose. Incredibly admirable. So when we think about our great and privileged nation, it's hard to not think about the family firms that have helped make it so. And yet we struggle. I show this slide. This is the cover of The Economist magazine last January. It talks about our struggling country, and it renames each state with a quippy name. Washington, I think, is washed up. Oregon is Oregon. Gone, rather, and each state is renamed because each state is struggling in its own way. I hope this is considered tasteful humor. We really believe that it's the family firms that are going to pull us out of this economic downturn, and we're trying to support them. So the ways that we're doing that through Family Enterprise USA is four areas primarily. I'll start with advocacy, and we'll think about advocacy as an umbrella over 2 areas, education and lobbying. In terms of education, what we're doing is getting out the message, trying to speak at Rotaries, trying to publish reports, speaking at universities. Any kind of gatherings that we can form around our mission are really important. In terms of public relations, we have grown from 60 followers on our Facebook page in May to almost 9,000 when I checked last night. So there's definitely growing interest and momentum in terms of family enterprises. Also, we've made the media in a number of national and many, many regional publications in the last 4 to 6 months, so the momentum is gathering. Op-ed pieces being printed, and also media interviews. So we're really proud of that. We're also supportive of rigorous academic research that is a part of our mission, but we're also conducting our own research. And we are doing a survey right now that's accessible on our website, And it's directed to family enterprise owners. It's a 10-minute online survey and really goes deep into public policy and what family firms, what their opinions are in terms of public policy and regulation. So I would encourage any of you to go to our website and take a look at that, and also to complete it in the next couple of weeks if you can. So I'll go back to lobbying for a second. A very frequently asked question is, where is the organization headquartered? It is headquartered in Minneapolis, and that's simply because of the founding benefactor who put the money up is headquartered there, and so there's an office there. But really what we're doing is working towards a more regular presence in D.C. So that's how I'd like you to think about it. We want to be at the table when decisions are being made. For comparison, in Europe, there is an organization called European Family Business that's been around about 14 years. They actually have a designated official who's looking at every, and it'd be comparable to somebody at our cabinet level, who's looking at every piece of legislation when it comes through with a family business lens. That would be a real fantasy goal for us to have that. So in the meantime, we're trying to create this platform and gather this critical mass of people together, and we're trying to get their voices to help them identify what are some of the public policy concerns that you have. This is just an initial first blush at some of the issues. The estate tax, you have a very local and vocal proponent of repealing the estate tax in Frank Blethen from the Seattle Times. The capital gains issue, I think, can be quickly summarized as the issue that was highlighted recently when Warren Buffett talked about his administrative assistant paying a higher tax rate than he did. And I think the nuance to that, or the detail to that that's missing, is that his income comes from capital gains, not from earned income. So there's a judgment that we have to make there as a society. Should earned income be taxed differently than income that is working hard to grow a company, for example, or to invest and take risk, which is what Warren Buffett does. Healthcare law is incredibly complex, and I think the prior speaker knows much more about that than I do. But the complexity around the healthcare laws is a huge issue for all businesses, regardless of their size. And then just in general, one-size-fits-all regulations. I met with a furniture maker in Corvallis this week, or last week, and he has fewer than 50 employees. And he's committed to keeping fewer than 50 employees because it's his sense that between 50 and 100 is a danger zone for a business owner in terms of the regulations that are really directed at larger companies, but they impact so many family businesses with fewer than, with a smaller number of employees. This is our website. The hyperlink won't work, so I won't go to it. But if you go to Family Enterprise USA, you can see the link to that survey, and I would very much welcome your input on that. I see Jim standing up. That's my cue that I want to open the next 7 minutes up to Q&A from the audience. I have a list of frequently asked questions here in case there aren't any, but I would hope that maybe I've stimulated some questions that you all will have. And I guess there are 2 roving microphones, and if you raise your hand or stand, and we'll get going on questions. Okay. Go ahead.
What kinds of research are you doing?
At this point, the only internal research that we are doing is the survey that we did last fall, very high-level overview, asking family enterprises really generic questions. This year we're going deeper in terms of public policy, but a fantasy goal would be for us to support research at a very deep level that's happening at universities. And one of my board members is with one of the premier institutions. It's Kennesaw State University in Georgia. They have probably 6 faculty members doing research, and so they're doing some rigorous research that they're sharing with us. As a comparison to, I spoke a couple weeks ago at the North American Millers Association, and they have the resources to actually fund a professorship, I think it was in Oklahoma, a professorship in corn studies, I think it was. So it would be a fantasy goal of ours to have enough resources to, fund some more detailed research that's, of course, valid and credible. Does that answer it? Thank you.
Question here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a question about your point on real estate holdings, because I attended a seminar last week and learned that the Dodd-Frank law has a provision in it specific to seller financing. So anyone who wants to seller finance any kind of property If you make a mistake, it's a 25-year in jail sentence and $1 million a day fine. And the lawyer that spoke at this seminar suggested that there have been changes in the real estate laws covered by Dodd-Frank that everyone really needs to be aware of. What are you doing to help protect your members from what appeared to everyone in the room, I was in anyway, to be a massive overreach?
Well, the Dodd-Frank is not the only massive overreach. So at this point, too, I should say that we have about 40 members and donors to our organization. And honestly, if we've been to D.C. a number of times and had meetings with people, and when they ask us about who do you represent, and we have such a small mass at this point, the voice isn't as loud as it needs to be. But two of the questions on our current survey are directed particularly at Dodd-Frank and in terms of family office, the impact on family offices. And so I can't say that we have a position because we need to get the voices around this. I think we'll have a position in a month or 6 weeks when we get our data analyzed from our survey, because it would be speculative for me to say that at this point. But clearly, that's an example of something that was had unintended consequences. It was directed to hedge fund managers, and then it ended up impacting lots of family enterprises that have, it's very common for family enterprises to have real estate as part of their portfolio, which is part of the reason we use family enterprise as a name for the organization, because it extends beyond just the operating company. The enterprise ends up being, their real estate holdings, their philanthropy, their family office, other things. So I don't know if I'm guessing that's not the detailed, complete answer that you would like, sir, but the point is that that's an example of something that went awry that has a significant impact on lots of family firms. Question here?
When the current national administration lost complete control of both houses of Congress, they seemed to decide, okay, we can't get it done legislatively, we're going to do it by executive order. And that seems to me to have become a very big risk for family enterprise.
Yeah, I think the risk really is that there's so much disenchantment with our own government system at the moment. That's a takeaway from our survey that we did last year. And I should say that Family Enterprise USA was not founded in the response to any particular administration being in office. And we really, one of the challenges with our organization is to make our platform nonpartisan. Because as my data hopefully convinced you, family enterprise interests are in the interests of all of us. And we need to come together as a country to represent them. And it doesn't matter, there isn't a single issue that needs to be resolved, and then Family Enterprise USA can go away. There isn't a certain administration that needs to be in place, and then we can go away. It's really much broader and long-term than that.
Question out here?
Mm-hmm.
Could you comment on trends in family businesses? Are they changing from what they would have been a decade or 2 decades ago?
That's a great question, and the trend, I think, wouldn't be as relevant in a decade or two context. Because family enterprises are really much, they think generationally. And so the statistics around the success rate or the failure rate, we used to say only a third of family enterprises make it from the first generation to the second. And of that third, only a third make it from the second generation to the third, and then it continues on. So you're in the single digits by the time you're in the fourth generation, or even actually by the third generation. We see that now we say, but isn't that phenomenal? Because if you look at the Fortune 500 companies 100 years ago, that's actually less. It's a lower success rate. Who was around then and who is still around now? So the family firms have a resiliency that the public companies that are shareholder controlled don't necessarily have. So I think a trend is that we, the people who work in this field, are starting to recognize the power and the resiliency and the fortitude of family firms. And that's actually, again, globally the same case. In fact, internationally, some countries, China, lots of European countries, South America, it's more than 90% of their GDP that's coming from family enterprises. Thank you. Thank you.
She's just said old friends. I said, no, longtime friends. You didn't play softball, did you? Ann, your organization is doing great work. I'm glad you're part of the national discussion about the importance of business. That's great. Thank you all for your participation here today. There's quite a long list. I won't read through all of them, but thank you certainly to Esther and Ann for being our keynote speakers. Next week, November 16th, we're at the Grand Hyatt with featured speaker General Peter Shirelli talking about current Army priorities. I have heard this guy is somebody you want to hear, so please do join us next week. In the short segment that day, we'll have an update on your club service activities with Paul Hepner and also a report on...
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.